The sound was not of anger, but of curiosity, a clean, precise snap, followed by the crystalline sigh of 1,000 fractures propagating through Venetian glass. It was the sound of a $25,000 custom-blown water pitcher, a centerpiece at Aria, Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishment, being methodically deconstructed. It was the 4th such masterpiece that month. 11-year-old Elara Thorne, daughter of tech magnate Marcus Thorne, was not a brat. Brats threw tantrums. Elara conducted experiments. She had dismantled a Patek Philippe grandfather clock to understand its escapement mechanism, reprogrammed the Thorne Tower's entire smart home system to operate on binary commands she tapped out on the walls, and reduced a series of MIT-educated tutors to quivering heaps of intellectual inadequacy. The tabloids called her the demolitionist heiress, a force of nature in a bespoke Fendi dress. Her father, a man who could bend markets to his will, was broken. He had exhausted every specialist, every therapist, every elite institution. He had tried everything except her, a 24-year-old waitress named Maya Lin, who was 3 weeks from being evicted, and whose greatest asset was a profound understanding of broken things. And she was about to do what no one else had ever considered. She was about to lean in and admire the wreckage. Aria wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater of wealth. Perched 60 floors above Columbus Circle, it offered a panoramic view of Central Park that made the city look like a quiet, orderly jewel box. The patrons were the kind of people who didn't carry wallets, whose names were whispered like incantations of power. Maya Lin knew their tells. She was a student of surfaces, of the fine cracks that spider-webbed beneath polished veneers. At 24, she moved through the rarefied air with a quiet efficiency that made her almost invisible, a ghost in a starched black uniform. Her mind, however, was rarely on the Michelin-starred plates she carried. It was in her cramped Brooklyn studio with the smell of clay and Japanese lacquer. It was focused on the delicate art of kintsugi, the practice of mending broken pottery with seams of gold. It was a philosophy she lived by, that an object's history of damage made it more, not less, beautiful. Her own life was a study in carefully mended fractures, a scholarship lost, a family splintered, a dream deferred. She was paying for her MFA in ceramics, one condescending hedge fund manager at a time. She was tired, but she wasn't shattered. The name Marcus Thorne was synonymous with the future. His company, Thorne Dynamics, was the global leader in robotics and artificial intelligence. He had built an empire on cold, hard logic, on algorithms that predicted human behavior with terrifying accuracy. But the one variable he could not solve was his own daughter. Since his wife, Helena, a brilliant inventor herself, had died in a tragic lab accident 3 years prior, Elara had become a black hole, pulling all light and order into her chaotic orbit. Maya knew the stories. Every high-end service worker in New York did. Elara had been expelled from the Avonworth Institute for rewiring the school's bell system to play death metal at 150 decibels. She had grounded her father's private jet by hacking the avionics system, arguing that the pilot's sleep schedule was off by 7%, increasing the probability of error. She was 11 years old and wielded her intellect like a weapon, leaving a trail of bewildered adults in her wake. It was a crisp autumn evening, the city lights beginning to prick the twilight, when the maitre d' approached Maya's station, his face pale. "Table 7. "Marcus Thorne," he whispered, as if speaking the name might summon a thunderclap. Maya saw them then. Marcus Thorne looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man walking a tightrope over a canyon. His famous focus was frayed. His eyes, which could dissect a hostile board member from 100 feet, were lost and exhausted. Ilara was a storm contained in a small frame. Her dark hair was cut in a severe, geometric bob, and her eyes missed nothing. They weren't angry or defiant. They were analytical, scanning the room, deconstructing it into its component parts. "Good evening, Mr. Thorne, Miss Thorne," Maya said, her voice a calm anchor in the tense silence that surrounded them. "May I get you something to start with?" The performance began instantly. "The carbonation in this water is inconsistent," Ilara stated, holding her glass to the light. "The bubbles are irregularly sized. It suggests a problem with the pressure regulator in your system." "Ilara, please," Marcus sighed, the words worn smooth with use. "And the lighting," she continued, pointing a small finger at a multi-$1,000 chandelier. "The frequency of the LED is 59.8 Hertz. It's almost imperceptible, but it's causing a subharmonic flicker that is disruptive to the optic nerve. I can't possibly eat under these conditions." This wasn't a tantrum. Maya recognized it with the clarity of an artist seeing true form. This was an intellectual firewall. It was a complex, systematic dismantling of her environment to maintain absolute control. The girl wasn't misbehaving. She was fortifying her defenses. "I can bring you bottled still water, miss," Maya offered, her tone even. "And I can ask the manager if it's possible to dim the lighting over your table." Ilara paused, her eyes narrowing. She was accustomed to exasperation or panicked placating. This calm problem-solving was an unexpected input. "The water pitcher," she said, her attention shifting to the intricate Venetian glass vessel on the table. The molecular structure of hand-blown glass is inherently unstable. It's filled with microstresses. It's beautiful, but it's fundamentally flawed. It wants to break. Marcus looked up, a flicker of surprise in his tired eyes. Maya met his gaze for a fraction of a second before turning back to Ilara. "My name is Maya. I'll be taking care of you. You're right about the glass. The stress is what gives it its character. Like a person." The air crackled. This was the moment where tutors resigned and psychologists suggested medication. Maya simply stood there, her notepad held loosely at her side, her expression one of genuine interest. Ilara stared at her, then delivered her order with the precision of a surgeon. "I want the pan-seared scallops, but I want them seared for exactly 45 seconds on each side at a surface temperature of 190 degrees Celsius. The risotto must be made with Acquerello rice, and the saffron threads must be from Iran, not Spain. If the chef uses Spanish saffron, I'll know." "Of course," Maya said, jotting it down without a flicker of reaction. 45 seconds at 190 Celsius. Iranian saffron. Understood. And for you, sir?" Marcus Thorne stared at Maya as if she had just levitated. "Just a black coffee." "Right away." As Maya walked toward the kitchen, she could feel the girl's intense gaze on her back. 10 minutes later, she returned with the coffee and a bread basket. As she placed it on the table, Ilara, who had been studying the water pitcher with unnerving focus, reached out. Her fingers didn't knock it over. They found a specific pressure point on the handle, a place where the glass curved and thinned. With a precise, calculated push, she applied force. The snap was followed by the sound of the pitcher collapsing in on itself, a waterfall of ice and water cascading onto the pristine white tablecloth. It hadn't been an act of rage. It had been an execution. The restaurant fell silent. A collective gasp rippled through the room. "The stress was concentrated at the joint," Ilara said coolly, as if delivering a lecture. "Poor design." Marcus Thorne visibly deflated, the last of his energy draining away. He buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he mumbled into the table. "God, I am so sorry." Maya didn't look at Marcus. She didn't look at the spreading puddle or the glittering shards of glass. She looked directly at Ilara. The entire restaurant was a statue garden of shocked faces. Maya could see the manager, Jean-Pierre, gliding from his post like a panther, his expression thunderous. This was it. The end of her job, drowned in a billionaire's dysfunction. "Monsieur Thorne, I am—" Jean-Pierre began, his voice tight with fury, but Maya held up a hand. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it held such quiet authority that it stopped the seasoned manager in his tracks. She knelt, but not to clean. She picked up one of the larger, curved shards of the broken handle. She turned it over in her fingers, examining the clean break, the way the light refracted through the fractured edge. She looked at it, then at Ilara. Marcus was already fumbling for his wallet, the matte black of his unlimited credit card emerging like a shield. "I'll cover everything. The pitcher, the cleaning, I'll pay for everyone's dinner tonight. Please, just—" "It was an elegant break," Maya said, her voice soft but carrying in the tomb-like silence of the room. Ilara's head, which had been tilted with clinical detachment, snapped up. Her mouth fell open slightly. Of all the reactions she had anticipated, fury, fear, tears, condescension, calm, technical admiration was not on the list. "But I have a question," Maya continued, still kneeling, bringing her eyes level with the girls. "You used a single pressure point. Was that to exploit the tensile stress from the cooling process? Or did you identify a flaw in the artisan's joint work?" Marcus lifted his head from his hands, his expression one of utter disbelief. Jean-Pierre looked as if his brain was trying to reboot. Ilara was, for the first time, speechless. She blinked. "I'm just curious," Maya said, finally reaching for a napkin to carefully start gathering the larger pieces. "Because if you were targeting the inherent molecular stress, that's genius. But if you just found a weak spot, that's simply good observation. Both are impressive, but the former is more profound." A tiny, almost invisible spark of something, pride, confusion, lit Ilara's eyes before she extinguished it. "Shut up," she mumbled, but the words had no force. "I'm serious," Maya said, standing up with the shards in her napkin. "All that insight just to make a mess. It's a waste of a good hypothesis. Now, is your order still valid? Or was that simply the appetizer? I'm not hungry anymore." "All right, then you can sit quietly while your father has his coffee, which is getting cold." Maya efficiently cleaned the table, replacing the tablecloth with the seamless grace of a seasoned professional. She brought Marcus a fresh coffee and a glass of bottled still water for Ilara. She never once apologized or acted flustered. She was simply a calm, immutable presence. For the rest of their time there, Ilara Thorne was silent. She didn't complain about the lights. She didn't tap her feet. She just sat, watching Maya move through the restaurant, her face a mask of profound, recalcitrant thought. Marcus drank his coffee. He paid the bill, leaving a tip so large it was almost absurd, and stood. "Thank you," he said to Maya, his voice raw. "It's my job," she replied. As they walked toward the exit, Ilara glanced back over her shoulder. Her eyes met Maya's. Maya gave a small, neutral nod. Ilara didn't smile, but the hard, defensive shell around her seemed, for just a moment, to have a hairline crack in it. An hour later, as Maya was polishing silverware, Jean-Pierre handed her the cordless phone. "It is for you, the personal assistant of Mr. Thorne. She said it is a matter of extreme urgency." Maya's heart sank. She was being sued, or fired retroactively. She wasn't sure which was worse. She took the phone. "This is Maya Lin." "Ms. Lin," a crisp voice said on the other end. "Mr. Thorne requests your presence. His car will be outside your place of employment in 20 minutes. It was not a question. The car was a black Maybach, a silent, armored vessel that whispered of untouchable power. As Maya sank into the cream leather interior, she felt as if she were being transported to another reality. They drove uptown, towards the crystalline spire of Thorn Tower, a building that didn't just scrape the sky, but seemed to hold it up. Maya was escorted by a silent man in a dark suit directly to a private elevator. It opened not into a lobby, but into the penthouse itself. The apartment was an astonishing triplex of glass, steel, and stark white marble. It was less a home than a monument to technological perfection, filled with minimalist furniture and abstract art that cost more than most countries' GDP. The view over the city was absolute. Marcus Thorne was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the world he had mastered. He turned, and in his own domain, the exhaustion was replaced by an intimidating aura of command. "Ms. Lin, thank you for coming." "You didn't exactly give me a choice," Maya said, clutching the strap of her worn messenger bag, a small, handmade piece of her own world in this sterile temple. A faint smile touched his lips. "No, I suppose not. Please, sit." She sat on a white leather sofa that felt more like a sculpture than a piece of furniture. "I will be direct," Marcus said, his eyes boring into her. "What I saw tonight, no one has ever done that. You didn't placate her. You didn't challenge her. You didn't break. You engaged her." "I was just doing my job," she repeated, though she knew it was more than that. "No, you saw something different. Everyone else sees a behavioral problem, a monster, a paycheck. You saw something else." "What was it?" Maya thought for a moment, her gaze drifting to a kinetic sculpture in the corner, its parts moving in a complex, hypnotic dance. "I saw a brilliant engineer in a world that only sees a broken little girl. Her job is to prove she's smarter than everyone else, so they'll keep their distance. And she's very, very good at it." Marcus nodded slowly, a deep weariness settling back over him. "She is. 7 behavioral specialists, 4 elite schools, a dozen tutors. She consumes them. They come in with their textbooks and their theories, and she disassembles their confidence in under an hour. They are either afraid of her, or they're afraid of me. You were afraid of neither." He paused, turning to face her fully. "I want to hire you, Ms. Lin, not as a governess or a tutor. I don't know what to call it. A companion, an interpreter. I want you to spend time with her, to do what you did tonight. Whatever that was." Maya's mind was a whirlwind. "Mr. Thorne, I'm a waitress. I'm an artist. I'm not qualified for—" "The qualified have all failed," he snapped, his control cracking. "They have failed her. I have failed her." He walked to a vast, polished desk. "They see the destruction. You saw the design." He turned back, his expression resolute. "I want to offer you a position. Your salary will be $500,000 a year." Maya stopped breathing. The number was so vast it felt like a prank. It was escape. It was the end of debt, the end of the constant, grinding fear of failure. "Furthermore," he continued, pressing his advantage, "I will fund your master's program in full, and I will establish a grant, in your name, at the university of your choice, to fund other artists working at the intersection of design and restoration." This wasn't real. It was a dream she couldn't have even dared to conjure. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me?" "Because you didn't see what was broken," he said. "You saw how it broke. And you were the first person in 3 years who made my daughter stop and think." Before she could form a response, a voice as cold and sharp as breaking ice cut through the cavernous room. "Marcus, You cannot be this foolish." A woman emerged from an adjoining office. She was tall and impossibly chic, dressed in a severe grey suit that looked like it had been woven from shadows and money. Her silver blonde hair was pulled into a tight chignon, and her face was a mask of aristocratic disapproval. She looked at Maya as if she were something unpleasant she'd found on the sole of her Louboutin shoe. "This is a child psychiatrist's problem, not a job for the help." "Cassandra, this is not your concern," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "Elara is my niece, and the stability of this family and this company is very much my concern," the woman, Cassandra Thorne, retorted. She was Marcus's older sister and the COO of Thorne Dynamics. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, raked over Maya. "You are an artist. What precisely is your therapeutic modality? Finger painting?" "Cassandra," Marcus warned. "No," Maya said, finding her voice. It trembled slightly, but she stood up, meeting the older woman's glacial stare. "You're right, Miss Thorne. I don't have a degree in psychology. I don't move in your world." She gestured around the opulent room. "But I'm not applying for a job as a therapist. Your brother is asking me to communicate with his daughter. And it seems I'm the only one who's found a language she understands." She turned her gaze to Marcus. "But if I accept your offer, I have conditions." Cassandra let out a sound that was half scoff, half laugh. "Conditions? You are in no position." "What are they?" Marcus interrupted, his eyes fixed on Maya. "One," Maya said, her courage solidifying. "I am not staff. I don't wear a uniform. I am not a nanny to be ordered around. I am here for Elara, and my authority in matters concerning her is second only to yours." "Done," Marcus said. "Two," she continued, looking directly at Cassandra. "Ms. Thorne stays out of it. Her concern is not productive. When I am with Elara, we are to be left alone." Cassandra's face tightened with fury. "How dare you? Marcus, this is unacceptable." "Marcus?" Maya asked, holding his gaze, refusing to let him look away. He looked at his sister. "Cassandra, for now, you will respect Miss Lynn's position. Please, leave us. You are making a grave mistake, Marcus. You're entrusting your daughter to a naive amateur. It's reckless." She shot Maya a look of pure venom and swept from the room. "And three?" Marcus asked, turning back to Maya. "Three," Maya said, taking a deep breath. "This isn't a way for you to outsource your daughter. If I need you, you show up. No board meetings, no international calls. If I say you need to be at dinner, you are there. Your money can't buy you a proxy for this. Otherwise, it's just a waste of everyone's time." Marcus Thorne, the man who built an empire on logic and control, looked at the 24-year-old artist who was making demands, and for the second time that night, he was completely surprised. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, a flicker of warmth in the cold, perfect room. "When can you start?" The Thorne penthouse was a fortress of solitude. The staff moved with hushed reverence, their footfalls swallowed by acres of white marble. There were no family photos, no comfortable clutter, no signs of life beyond the faint hum of state-of-the-art technology. It was a beautiful, sterile prison, and Elara was its lonely, brilliant queen. Maya's first day began the following afternoon. She had given her notice at Aria, her MFA thesis suddenly a distant concern. She arrived in her own clothes, simple black jeans, a grey sweater, and worn leather boots, feeling like a splash of watercolor in a black and white photograph. Elara was waiting for her in the vast living area, perched on a sterile sofa, a tablet in her lap. She didn't look up. "You're late, by 4 minutes and 17 seconds. "Sorry," Maya said, setting her messenger bag down. The G train was holding at Metropolitan. She held up a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. I brought you something. Elara finally looked up, her expression skeptical. Maya unwrapped the object. It was a simple ceramic teacup, but it was webbed with fine, golden lines. It was one of her own kintsugi pieces. "It's a cup," Elara said flatly. "It was a broken cup," Maya corrected. "Someone dropped it. They were going to throw it away." She placed it on the glass table between them. "I fixed it." Elara leaned forward, her eyes tracing the golden seams. "The repairs are asymmetrical. The gold is 24 carat, suspended in a lacquer base, Urushi lacquer probably. But the bonding is imperfect. Under a microscope, you would see micro fissures. It's still weak." "It's stronger at the seams than it was before," Maya said calmly. "And now it has a story. It's not just a cup anymore. It's this cup." "That's an inefficient and sentimental viewpoint," Elara stated, but she didn't look away from the cup. "Perfection is the ideal." "Perfection is boring," Maya countered, "and it's a lie. Nothing is perfect." This was the pattern for the first week. Elara would present a fortress of logic, and Maya would offer a quiet philosophy of beautiful imperfection. Elara would explain the quantum mechanics of a new processor Thorne Dynamics was developing. Maya would talk about the beautiful chaos of a glaze firing in a kiln. Elara saw the world as a series of problems to be solved. Maya saw it as a collection of stories to be understood. Maya discovered that Elara's bedroom was less a room and more a laboratory. Gadgets in various states of disassembly littered every surface. A high-end drone was stripped to its circuit boards, its parts neatly organized. A smart watch was splayed open, its microscopic gears arranged in a perfect spiral. She wasn't destroying them. She was learning their secrets. The second week, Elara escalated her defense. Maya found her in the home's tech lab, a room that looked like the bridge of a starship. "I'm beta testing a new AI," Elara announced. "Project Chimera. It's a predictive language model my father's team is developing. It can analyze a person's speech patterns and psychological profile to predict their next sentence with 94% accuracy." "Impressive," Maya said. "It has been studying your speech from the security recording since you arrived," Elara said, a cruel little smile on her lips. "Let's play a game. You start a sentence, and I'll have Chimera finish it." Maya knew a trap when she saw one. "Okay. Let's start with an easy one," Elara said, her fingers flying over a keyboard. "I took this job because—" She looked at Maya expectantly. Maya took a breath. "I took this job because—" A smooth, synthesized voice filled the room, a perfect mimic of Maya's own cadence. "Because the salary offered was a life-altering sum of money that would solve my significant financial difficulties." Elara's smile widened. "See? Logic. It always comes down to the most logical motivator." "It's not wrong," Maya admitted, "but it's incomplete. Try this one. The most beautiful things are—" Elara typed. "The most beautiful things are—" The AI voice responded instantly. "Things that exhibit perfect symmetry and adhere to the mathematical principles of the golden ratio." "No," Maya said softly. "The most beautiful things are the ones that survive." Elara's smile faltered. The AI had no response. It was a logical machine, and Maya had given it a poetic, illogical truth. A crack in the fortress. The real breakthrough came not from a battle of wits, but from a moment of shared silence. Maya had discovered a hidden door behind a bookshelf in the library. It led to a dusty, forgotten room. Unlike the rest of the penthouse, this room was warm and cluttered. Blueprints were pinned to the walls, prototypes of strange, elegant machines sat on workbenches, and in the center of it all was a large, unfinished metal sculpture, like a mechanical flower that had yet to bloom. It was Helena Thorne's workshop. Maya was sketching one of the prototypes when Elara appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "You're not allowed in here." "Your father doesn't know about this room, does he?" Maya asked gently. "It was our place," Elara whispered, her voice losing its sharp, clinical edge. "He sealed the main lab, but he never knew about this one." She walked over to the unfinished sculpture. This was her last project, a kinetic bloom. It was supposed to follow the sun, opening and closing its petals with the light, powered by a new kind of photovoltaic cell she invented. "It's beautiful," Maya said. "It's broken," Elara said, her voice trembling. "I was with her, in the main lab. She was testing the power source. There was a surge, an arc. I was supposed to be monitoring the regulators." A tear traced a path down her cheek. I looked away for a second, just a second, at my tablet, and it all went wrong. This was the heart of it all, the source of the chaos, not malice, but a devastating, crushing guilt. The brilliant little girl who believed she had broken her entire world with one moment of inattention. "It wasn't your fault, Elara," Maya said, her heart aching for the small, burdened child. "I broke it," she sobbed, the dam of her composure finally bursting. "I broke everything, so I take things apart to see if I can put them back together. But I can never put them back together." Not really. Maya didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say it would be okay. She simply sat with her in the dusty, secret room, a silent witness to her grief. And in that shared silence, something began to mend. The change was subtle at first. Elara started joining Maya for meals without being prompted. She showed Maya the project she was working on, her explanations shifting from intellectual challenges to shared enthusiasm. They started spending most of their time in Helena's workshop. Maya would sketch, and Elara would tinker with the kinetic bloom, her small hands moving with a surgeon's precision. She was trying to finish it. Cassandra Thorne observed this new alliance with a hawk's unblinking stare. She saw the thawing of her niece, the flicker of life returning to her brother's eyes, and she recognized it for what it was. A threat. Her influence over Marcus was rooted in his grief and his helplessness with Elara. A healing family had no place for her brand of cold, corporate control. She needed Elara to be the demolitionist heiress, the unstable genius, not a healing child. The axe fell with calculated corporate precision. It happened on a Tuesday. Maya arrived to find the penthouse atmosphere thick with a dreadful, silent tension. Marcus was in his home office, the door closed. A man in a suit she didn't recognize stood outside it. Cassandra met her in the foyer. She was wearing a sympathetic, sorrowful expression that was more terrifying than her usual glare. "Maya, I'm so glad you're here. There's been an incident." "What's wrong? Where's Elara?" "She's in her room. She's terribly upset. Marcus is with our head of corporate security." A cold dread pooled in Maya's stomach. She was led into the office. Marcus was behind his desk, his face a grey mask of stone. The security chief, a stern man named Harris, stood beside him. "Maya," Marcus said, his voice flat, devoid of all warmth. "This morning we were alerted to an unauthorized data transfer from our main server, a massive file. It was the entire R&D folder for Project Olympian," Cassandra supplied, her voice laced with manufactured gravity. "Our next-generation robotics platform, our most valuable secret." The data was transferred to an encrypted, untraceable server, The kind our competitors use for industrial espionage, Harris added. I don't understand, Maya said. What does this have to do with me? Marcus slid a tablet across the desk. On the screen was a digital forensics report. The breach originated from inside this network, from an unauthorized laptop connected to our system. He looked at her, his eyes cold. It was traced to the guest Wi-Fi password, the one I gave you. Maya's world tilted. What? No, that's impossible. The laptop was Alara's, Cassandra said softly. But the commands weren't entered by her. They were entered by someone using a remote access protocol. Harris's team traced the remote signal. Harris cleared his throat. The signal originated from a public Wi-Fi network at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. We pulled the security footage. You were there yesterday morning, Ms. Lin, at the exact time of the breach. They showed her the image. It was her, sitting at a table, her laptop open. She had been working on her thesis. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I was just writing. I wouldn't even know how to do something like that. We found the protocol hidden on Ilara's machine, Marcus said, his voice like chipping ice. It was designed to look like a simple file-sharing program, the kind an artist might use to transfer large image files. It was clever. Marcus, you have to believe me, Maya pleaded, her eyes searching his for any sign of the trust they had built. I didn't do this. Cassandra, you know I know that you had debt, Cassandra cut in, her voice dripping with pity. I know that a competing firm would pay tens of millions for that data. We all wanted to believe in you, Maya. But the evidence, it's irrefutable. It was a perfect trap. So technical, so logical. It was designed to speak to Marcus in the only language he truly trusted, the language of data. And the data was telling him she was a corporate spy who had manipulated his child to get to his... The betrayal was not a clean snap, but a slow, grinding pulverization. It wasn't the loss of the job, the impossible salary, or the grant that would have changed the lives of a dozen other struggling artists. It was the look in Marcus Thorne's eyes. He had built an empire on seeing patterns, on extrapolating truth from data, and the data had just told him she was a lie. In that moment, she was no longer Maya Lin, the quiet observer, the student of beautiful fractures. She was a hostile variable, an anomaly to be isolated and purged from the system. His face, which had in recent weeks begun to show the warmth of a man rediscovering hope, had reverted to its factory settings, a mask of cold, impenetrable logic. Harris, the security chief, did not touch her, but his presence was a physical force, herding her toward the private elevator. Cassandra stood beside her brother, a hand resting on his arm in a gesture of feigned solace that was, in reality, a declaration of ownership. Her victory was silent, absolute, and chillingly elegant. As the polished steel doors of the elevator slid shut, Maya's last view was of Cassandra's face, a mask of curated sorrow that couldn't quite conceal the triumphant glint in her winter sky eyes. The descent from the 68th floor was a journey through a vacuum. The silent, swift drop mirrored the hollowing out of her own chest. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass wall, watching the city lights blur into streaks of indifferent fire. For weeks, she had been an interpreter, a bridge between two worlds. Now, she was just a waitress again, but one who was about to be sued by a billionaire. A ghost being exorcised from the machine. Down in the cavernous white marble lobby, under the cold gaze of a security guard who now looked at her with suspicion, the humiliation solidified. The doorman, who had greeted her by name that morning, simply held the heavy glass door open, his expression carefully blank. The cold night air hit her like a physical slap, a brutal re-entry into her own reality. The black Maybach that had once ferried her to this new life was gone. She stood on the curb, the roar of Manhattan traffic a sudden, deafening assault after the sanctum-like quiet of Thorn Tower. She clutched the strap of her messenger bag, the only piece of her world she had brought into his, and began the long walk to the subway. Each step on the cracked pavement felt like a confirmation of her place. She did not belong up there in the sky. She belonged down here, with the broken things. The next 48 hours were a study in grey. Her cramped Brooklyn studio, once a haven of creative chaos, felt like a tomb. The smell of clay and lacquer, usually a comfort, was nauseating. Her kintsugi pieces, arranged on their shelves, seemed to mock her. The philosophy she had built her life around, that breakage and repair made things more beautiful, more valuable, felt like a naive, childish fantasy. She had tried to apply gold to a family that was not merely cracked, but actively grinding itself to dust. She picked up a small porcelain bowl she had recently mended, its web of golden seams intricate and delicate. It was a lie. The bowl was weaker. The repair was just a cosmetic cover-up for a fundamental flaw. With a surge of bitter self-loathing, she hurled it against the brick wall, where it shattered into 100 tiny, irreparable pieces. There. That felt more honest. The eviction notice, which had been a source of simmering panic, now lay on her kitchen counter, inert and meaningless. It was just paper. The threat it represented was dwarfed by the abstract terror of a federal lawsuit, of Marcus Thorne's limitless resources aimed directly at her life. But even that wasn't the core of the pain. The true agony was the image of Ilara, a brilliant, fragile girl trapped in a gilded cage, whose trust she had meticulously earned, only to be ripped away, leaving the child alone with the very person who had orchestrated the whole nightmare. She imagined Ilara, believing she had been betrayed yet again, retreating deeper into her fortress of logic and destruction. The small, tentative cracks of vulnerability she had shown to Maya sealing over with impenetrable ice. Maya hadn't just been framed. She had been made into a weapon against the very child she was trying to save. On the third morning, the intercom buzzed. It was a harsh, ugly sound that tore through the suffocating silence. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and then again, not with the patient rhythm of a delivery person, but with a frantic, insistent pattern. It sounded like Morse code. SOS. Irritated, dragged from the depths of her stupor, she lurched to the wall and pressed the talk button. "Go away." A voice, distorted by the cheap speaker, but utterly unmistakable, crackled back. "Negative. Proximity is essential for data transfer. Standing on this sidewalk is an inefficient allocation of my time and is attracting the attention of a man walking a Pomeranian. Open the door, Maya." It was Ilara. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through Maya's system, overriding the fog of despair. Fear, sharp and clear, replaced the dull ache. "You are to have no further communication with my daughter. I will press federal charges." Marcus's voice echoed in her mind. But Ilara was here. Alone. In Brooklyn. She slammed the buzzer, her hand trembling, and fumbled with the locks on her door. A moment later, Ilara Thorne stood in the hallway, a stark silhouette against the dim, flickering light. She looked smaller than she did in the penthouse, yet her presence filled the space. Her dark hair was slightly disheveled, her bespoke coat was unbuttoned, and her face was a mask of furious, focused energy. She wasn't sad or scared. She was at war. "Ilara, what are you doing here?" Maya whispered, pulling her inside and quickly shutting the door. You can't be here. Your father, he'll destroy me. He'll destroy both of us. My father is currently operating with corrupted data. He has become an inefficient processor, Ilara snapped, pushing past Maya and striding into the center of the small studio. Her analytical eyes swept over the room, the dusty shelves, the shattered porcelain on the floor, the stark eviction notice on the counter. This living arrangement is suboptimal. Maya's head was spinning. You don't think I did it? The question came out as a fragile breath of hope. Ilara turned, fixing her with a stare that was withering in its intensity. Steel Project Olympian. The file was 7.2 terabytes. It's a clumsy, brute force data grab. It lacks elegance. It's the intellectual equivalent of using a sledgehammer to open a watch. It's tactically loud, designed to be discovered. It's an act of arson, not espionage. She paused, her eyes narrowing. It's something she would do. My Aunt Cassandra operates on the principle that others are less intelligent than she is. It is a frequent, and in this case, fatal, miscalculation. From her oversized backpack, she pulled out a sleek, custom-built laptop and set it on Maya's cluttered work table. It looked like a piece of alien technology amidst the pottery tools and dried clay. She forgot I built the firewall and intrusion detection system for my own sub-network. She believes because I am a child, I am not observing her. Her fingers moved over the keyboard in a blur, a cascade of luminous green code filling the screen. Aunt Cassandra's frame was structurally sound, I'll grant her that. Spoofing your IP through the coffee shop's public Wi-Fi was clever. The remote access Trojan, disguised as an update for your art-sharing software, was a nice touch. A very elegant piece of social engineering. But she made 2 mistakes, Ilara continued, her voice dropping to a low, cold hum of concentration. First, she underestimated my paranoia. I run a cron job that creates a shadow backup of all network activity every 60 seconds to a private, encrypted server located in a decommissioned data center in Iceland. She erased the logs from the primary server, but she didn't know about the echo. She pointed a small, determined finger at a line of code. Here, the primary breach from my laptop occurred at 10:02:17 a.m., routed through your apparent IP address. But look. She highlighted another line. At 10:01:45 a.m., 32 seconds earlier, a system override command was sent directly to my network controller. A kill switch for my custom firewall. It came from a hard-lined executive terminal inside the Thorn Dynamics mainframe. Her eyes, dark and fierce, met Maya's. An IP address that is permanently assigned to the chief operating officer. Maya stared at the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The strings of code were meaningless to her, but the story they told was crystal clear. It was the architecture of the lie, laid bare. She initiated the override from her own office, Ilara explained, her voice devoid of emotion, a clinical dissection of betrayal. Then she remotely triggered the Trojan on my laptop to begin the loud data transfer, creating the digital smokescreen that led to you, a classic misdirection. But her second mistake was more philosophical. What was it? Maya whispered. Ilara looked up from the screen, and for the first time, the cold fire in her eyes was tempered by something else, something Maya had taught her. She assumed the only relationship between pieces of data is logical. She didn't account for intuition. For 3 years, her voice has had a specific subharmonic frequency when she talks about my well-being. It registers as concern, but it lacks the chaotic, unpredictable variables of genuine empathy. It's a performance. When she told me you were gone, that you had betrayed us, the performance was too perfect. The data was clean. Too clean. Real grief is messy. I knew before I even checked the logs that she was lying. Tears pricked at Maya's eyes. This brilliant, broken child hadn't just used logic to save her. She had used the very human, messy, imperfect lessons Maya had tried to share. She had trusted her heart. She broke it, Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. She tried to break everything. Ilara looked from the glowing screen to Maya's tear-streaked face, then to the shards of the porcelain bowl on the floor. A small, fierce smile touched her lips. "No," she said, her voice ringing with newfound certainty. "We are going to fix it. This is a design problem." "And the solution," she declared, pulling out her phone and tapping a contact labeled M. Thorne, "is a better, more complete presentation of the data." An hour and a half later, Marcus Thorne did not burst into the apartment. There was a hesitant, almost timid knock at the door. When Maya opened it, he stood there, not as a titan of industry, but as a man adrift. His tie was loosened, his hair was disheveled, and his face was a pale landscape of confusion, fear, and dawning horror. He had clearly broken every speed limit between Manhattan and Brooklyn. "Ilara!" he breathed, his eyes finding his daughter. The relief was instantly followed by a surge of parental fury. "You are grounded for a decade. Do you have any idea how worried I was? I was about to call the police. You can't just run off." "Sit down, father," Ilara commanded, her voice holding an authority that stopped him cold. She gestured to the only other chair in the room, a rickety wooden stool. "And listen. You are about to receive a remedial lesson in forensic analysis and the fallibility of incomplete datasets." For the next 20 minutes, in the cramped, clay-dusted studio of the woman he had wronged, Marcus Thorne was systematically dismantled. Ilara didn't shout. She presented her findings with the cold, irrefutable clarity of a physicist explaining the laws of the universe. She showed him the shadow logs, the override command from Cassandra's terminal, the time-stamps that proved the impossibility of Maya's guilt. She laid out not just the what, but the how and the why, deconstructing their family's tragedy into a cold equation of corporate ambition and psychological manipulation. Marcus sat on the small stool, a giant of a man made small, his gaze fixed on the laptop screen. The color drained from his face. He wasn't just seeing proof of his sister's betrayal. He was seeing a monument to his own catastrophic failure. He had built his life on the altar of data, believing it to be the ultimate, objective truth. He had trusted a clean, elegant data plot over the messy, chaotic truth of a person's character, the very character he had hired her for. He had looked Maya in the eye and called her a liar because an algorithm, manipulated by his own sister, had told him to. The entire foundation of his worldview, the operating system of his life, had suffered a fatal exception error. He finally looked up from the screen, his gaze finding Maya's. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The word sorry was a speck of dust in the Grand Canyon of his shame. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been worshipping a false god. "It is not enough to be smart, father," Ilara said, her voice softer now, filled not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. Mum was smart. She was the smartest person I ever knew. But she was also wise. She knew that data doesn't have a heart. You have to provide that part yourself. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. It was broken by the sharp ring of Marcus's phone. He glanced at the screen. "It's Cassandra," he said, his voice a dead monotone. "She's at the penthouse. She says it's urgent." "Good," Ilara said, closing her laptop. "Let her wait." That evening, the Thorne penthouse felt different. The cavernous living room, Usually a sterile monument to wealth, felt like a courtroom. Cassandra was pacing near the windows, her chic grey suit a kind of armor, her expression one of polite, controlled impatience. When she saw Maya walk in behind Marcus and Elara, her composure cracked for a fraction of a second. A flicker of pure venom crossed her face before being replaced by a mask of shocked concern. "Marcus, what is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "What is she doing here? I hope you've had her arrested." "There will be no arrests tonight," Marcus said. His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual booming authority. But it carried a new weight, the density of shattered illusions. He gestured not to a large screen, but to the small glass coffee table where Elara had placed her laptop. "Elara has something to show you." Cassandra glanced at the laptop, then back at Marcus, a dismissive, patronizing smile touching her lips. "Oh, Marcus, I know you're upset. Elara has likely concocted some elaborate theory, some fantasy to absolve her new friend. She's a child. She's lashing out. We need to get her proper, intensive. Show her," Marcus said to Elara, cutting his sister off. Elara simply turned the laptop around. There was no dramatic presentation, just the raw, undeniable proof, the shadow logs, the highlighted IP address, the irrevocable timestamp of the firewall override command, originating from her own desk. Cassandra stared at the screen, the blood drained from her face, leaving behind a waxy, pale sheen. The mask of aristocratic poise didn't just crack, it disintegrated, revealing the raw, desperate ambition beneath. Her perfect posture slumped. For a long, silent moment, she was simply a woman whose meticulous calculations had all, finally, been proven wrong. I did it for you, Marcus," she stammered, the words hollow, a last, desperate gambit. "For the family, to protect the company, to protect Elara from her, from this woman's influence. She was making her soft, sentimental." "You did it for her shares," Marcus said, his voice flat and dead. "You did it because a healing family has no room for a predator. You tried to poison my relationship with my daughter for profit. You tried to ruin an innocent life for control. You weaponized my grief, and you used my love for my child against me." He took a slow step forward. "You are not my sister. You are not an officer of this company. You are nothing to me." "Marcus, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My security team is waiting in the hall," he continued, his voice echoing in the vast, silent room. "They will escort you from the building. You will be given 30 minutes to collect your personal effects from your office. By morning, your severance package and a non-disclosure agreement that will follow you to the grave will be delivered. If you sign it, you will be wealthy enough to disappear. If you do not, or if you ever attempt to contact me or my daughter again, this," he gestured to the laptop, "goes to the district attorney and the board of every company you ever hope to work for. I will not just fire you, Cassandra. I will erase you." Defeated, hollowed out, Cassandra stared at him, then at Elara, then at Maya. In her eyes was the uncomprehending fury of a queen bee deposed by a quiet worker and a rebellious larva. She turned, without another word, and walked toward the door, her sharp heels clicking a frantic, fading rhythm on the marble floor. The heavy door closed behind her, and the silence she left in her wake was not empty, but clean. Marcus stood for a long moment, his back to them, looking out at the city. When he finally turned, his face was etched with a shame so profound it seemed to have aged him a decade. He looked at Maya, and his eyes were filled with a terrible, raw vulnerability. "Maya," he began, his voice thick with unshed tears. "The word sorry is an insult to what I owe you. It's a useless, pathetic word. My failure. It wasn't just a failure to trust you. It was a failure to trust my own daughter, a failure to trust myself. I let my own creation, my belief in the infallibility of data, blind me. He took a shaky breath. I became the one thing I never wanted to be, a bad equation, a father who needed proof before he could offer faith. You were afraid, Maya said softly, her gaze moving to Ilara, who was watching her father not with triumph, but with a cautious, hopeful curiosity. Fear makes people build walls. It makes them trust blueprints more than people. I'm done with blueprints, Marcus said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old strength, but transformed now into something new. Resolve. I'm done being afraid. He walked over to Ilara and knelt before her, something Maya knew he hadn't done in years. He didn't hug her. He simply took her small hand in his. You are your mother's daughter, he whispered. Brilliant, and fierce, and wise. He stood and looked at Maya, a desperate hope warring with the shame in his eyes. This place, he gestured around the sterile room. It's a mausoleum. Helena would have hated it. I want to build something in her name. A new lab. The Helena Thorne Initiative. Not for predictive AI or robotics or control. For creative technology. For things that have no immediate purpose. For things that are beautiful and intuitive and messy. Things that heal. He met her eyes. I don't want to offer you a job, Maya. I want to beg you to be my partner in this. I need someone to run it. Someone who understands that the cracks aren't the weakness. They're the entire point. Maya looked at this man, no longer a titan, but a father, trying to learn a new language. She looked at the girl, no longer a demolitionist, but a restorer. And she looked at the simple kintsugi, teacup she had brought on her first day, which still sat on a side table, its golden seams glowing under the soft evening light. It was the only object in the entire penthouse that had a history. Her own story had been broken, but here, in the wreckage, was an opportunity not just to repair it, but to build something stronger. I have conditions, she said softly. A flicker of a genuine smile, the first she had seen, touched Marcus's lips. I would expect nothing less. 1 year later, the Helena Thorne Initiative was not a laboratory. It was a beautiful, controlled chaos. Housed in a sun-drenched space 2 floors below the penthouse, it smelled of ozone, hot metal, and oil paints. Engineers worked alongside sculptors. Programmers collaborated with poets. At the center of the room, on a massive pedestal, stood Helena's kinetic bloom. It was finished. Its gleaming metallic petals, now laced with photovoltaic veins, so delicate they looked like leaf structures, were slowly, gracefully tracking the sun as it arced across the Manhattan sky. Ilara, now 12, was explaining its mechanics to a group of visiting university students, her voice confident and clear. She was no longer hiding behind her intellect. She was sharing it. Marcus stood off to the side, not supervising but simply listening, a look of quiet, unadulterated pride on his face. He caught Maya's eye from across the room and gave her a small, grateful nod. Later that afternoon, Maya found Ilara alone with the sculpture, gently polishing one of its petals. There was a flaw in the original design, Ilara said, without looking up, a structural weakness in the main bearing. My mother knew about it. She was trying to invent a new alloy to fix it when... She trailed off, then took a breath. I couldn't invent a new alloy, but I found a different way. She pointed to the base of the sculpture, where the massive bloom connected to its stem. There, at the point of highest stress, she had not hidden the repair. She had celebrated it. A thin, shimmering, intricate seam of gold was inlaid into the steel, flowing around the joint. It was not a weld, it was kintsugi, on an engineering scale. "I made the repair the strongest part of the whole structure," Ilara said, a confident smile gracing her lips. "It's better now. It has a story." Maya looked from the golden seam to the face of the young girl who had found a way to mend the past without erasing it. She had learned that you couldn't deconstruct a problem like grief. You could only build something new and beautiful around the empty space it left behind. Here, in this room full of impossible, beautiful machines, a man had learned to trust his heart over his data, and a child had learned that the most profound repairs are the ones that honor the break. And Maya, the quiet waitress who understood broken things, had discovered that sometimes the most important work of art you can ever create is a mended family.